The radio crackles, sharp, urgent, almost frantic. Keep her down in the tiger enclosure. I repeat, keep her down. Inside Hamerton Zoo Park, a day that began like any other has exploded into chaos. The front gates are open, families are walking in, and somewhere beyond the manicured lawns and souvenir stands, something has gone horribly, irreversibly wrong. Visitors glance toward the big cat section, their smiles fading as uniformed staff break into a sprint, faces pale, eyes locked ahead. The distant roars that drift over the tree line no longer sound majestic. They sound violent. In the heart of the carnivore zone, behind steel mesh and thick glass, a Malayan tiger named Sisip is not in his holding pen where he should be. He's in the main enclosure. And Rosa King, Hamerton's senior carnivore keeper, is in there with him. No barrier, no safety distance, no second chances. The air is thick with shouted commands. Someone yells for fire extinguishers. Others scream for guests to clear the area. One staff member is already on the radio to emergency services, voice breaking. "She's still inside! He's on her! Send help now!" What happened in the minutes leading up to this moment will become the subject of investigations, inquests, and haunting speculation. But right now, there's only one brutal truth. A 300-pound predator and the woman who cared for him are locked in the same space, and the clock is running out. From the moment she first walked through the gates of Hamerton Zoo Park, Rosa King wasn't just an employee, she was a force of nature. Visitors remember her wide, genuine smile, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke about the animals, and how she never seemed to rush an explanation, no matter how busy the day. But Rosa's true passion lived in the shadows of the carnivore enclosures. Tigers, cheetahs, lynx, apex predators that made most people take a step back, were the animals that made her heart race. She didn't just feed them, she understood them. She studied their moods, knew their quirks, and could read the twitch of an ear or flick of a tail like others read a sentence. Her bond with Sisip, the Malayan tiger, was particularly strong. To outsiders, he was a hulking, dangerous predator with eyes that could freeze you in place. To Rosa, he was a creature of beauty, intelligence, and, yes, unpredictability. She never forgot what he was capable of. She respected his power. Friends recall how Rosa used to say working with big cats was a privilege, one that demanded vigilance every second. "You can't switch off," she'd insist. "Not for a moment." That morning, May 29th, 2017, was no different. Rosa arrived before the zoo opened, moving through her routine with quiet efficiency. She cleaned viewing windows, prepared enclosures, and checked that the big cats were secured in their holding areas while she worked in the main exhibits. This was her element: the cool morning air, the rhythmic hum of zoo life, the knowledge that in just over an hour, she'd be sharing these animals with the public. But in a zoo, the line between control and chaos is razor thin. And for all her skill, all her experience, all her dedication, Rosa could never have imagined that today, something so small, a single lapse, a single unlatched barrier, would put her directly in the path of the animals she'd devoted herself to protecting. And once that line was crossed, there was no turning back. Sisip was no ordinary tiger. Born in captivity but carrying the untamed blood of the Malayan rainforest, he was muscle, speed, and instinct wrapped in 300 pounds of striped perfection. Every movement was silent, deliberate. Predators like him didn't waste energy unless it was to kill. Visitors would gasp at the sight of him, pressed against the glass as his amber eyes swept over them. Some swore he could see straight through you, reading every flicker of fear. Rosa always reminded people that Sisip wasn't a pet. He was a pure apex predator, shaped by millions of years of evolution to dominate his environment. In the wild, Malayan tigers stalk dense jungle terrain, blending into the shadows until they're close enough to strike. Their prey rarely sees them coming. Their attack is sudden, explosive, jaw clamping down on the throat, claws tearing into flesh, the kill completed before the victim can even scream. Even in captivity, those instincts never fade. They wait, buried beneath calm eyes and slow pacing, ready to erupt in a heartbeat. Keepers knew this. They built their routines on layers of barriers, protocols, and a healthy fear of what could happen if one of those layers failed. Sisip's sheer power was staggering. His forelimbs alone could crush bone. His bite force was strong enough to pierce a buffalo's hide, and his agility meant even a short sprint could close the distance between life and death in seconds. Rosa respected that power. She respected him. She often described Sisip as magnificent, but she never underestimated what he could do if given the chance. Yet that morning, deep inside the secured holding area, Sisip's routine was broken. Something was different. The familiar barrier between him and the outside world, between him and Rosa, wasn't locked the way it should have been. In the wild, a tiger notices the smallest changes in its territory. In captivity, it's no different. Sisip's ears twitched, muscles coiled. An opportunity had opened. And in his world, opportunities were seized without hesitation. The keeper he'd seen for years, the one who fed him, cleaned near his enclosure, and spoke to him in calm tones, was now in reach. And for a predator like Sisip, reach was all that mattered. It was supposed to be an ordinary start to the day. The park was still closed, the air cool with a light breeze carrying the scent of hay, damp earth, and animals beginning to stir. Rosa King walked her usual path toward the carnivore section, keys clipped to her belt, coffee still warming her hands from the staff kitchen. For keepers, mornings were a rhythm, reliable, almost meditative. Before the first visitors arrived, the zoo was theirs alone. The quiet punctuated by bird calls, the low chuff of a big cat, the metallic click of enclosure gates being checked and rechecked. Rosa had done this hundreds of times. Her focus that morning was Sisip's viewing window, where smudges from yesterday's curious children would need polishing before the gates opened. Normally, Sisip would be safely contained in his indoor holding pen while she worked on the public-facing side. The barrier system between keeper and animal was designed to be absolute. Steel gates, padlocks, and strict protocols meant there was no point at which a tiger and a human could share the same space. But that morning, something in the sequence was off. The holding gate, a thick, sliding metal panel, was not fully secured. It wasn't swinging wide open, but the lock that should have been engaged wasn't in place. A gap existed, small enough to seem harmless, but large enough for a determined tiger to change the rules. Rosa, confident in her routine, didn't see the danger right away. She moved into position, tools in hand, focused on the streaks on the glass. Inside the holding pen, Sisip was alert. His massive head lifted, ears swiveling toward the faint scrape of cloth against glass. This was different from feeding time, different from cleaning the holding area. Rosa was there, close, and a door between them was no longer an absolute. Predators don't hesitate when the line between can't and can disappears. Sisip began to move. In the next moments, the safety bubble that had protected Rosa every single day of her career would vanish. She had no idea she was already inside the tiger's strike zone. It happened in silence. No roar, no warning snarl. Just the soft padded whisper of 400 pounds of muscle sliding through an opening that should never have existed. The heavy gate didn't swing open dramatically. It didn't need to. A gap barely wider than a dinner plate was enough for Sisip to press his massive shoulder, flex, and force the steel to give. In a heartbeat, the tiger was no longer where he belonged. Rosa was crouched, one knee on the concrete, polishing the glass with tight, circular motions. Her mind was already on the next enclosure, the next task. The quiet morning gave her no reason to imagine death was moving toward her on silent pause. Sisip's eyes locked on her. To him, the space was no longer divided. There was no inside and outside. The barrier was gone, and the instinct that had been tempered by years of confinement surged forward. The distance between them vanished in a single, impossibly fast stride. By the time Rosa sensed movement, felt the shift in air behind her, it was already too late. The impact was brutal, the weight crushing her sideways. She barely had time to register the flash of orange and black before her body hit the ground. Concrete met skull. The breath left her lungs in a shocked gasp. Then came the sound, deep, guttural, and final. The sound of a predator fully committed. Every safety system, every routine, every morning she'd walked this same path. None of it mattered now. Sisip was in her world, and Rosa was in his. The first strike didn't feel like a swipe. It felt like being hit by a car. Sisip's forelimb, thick as a man's thigh, lashed forward with a speed that human eyes couldn't fully track. His claws didn't just scratch. They tore. Rosa's body twisted unnaturally under the blow, the sheer force lifting her partially off the ground before gravity dragged her back down. Her head snapped sideways, vision blurring with a sudden rush of stars. She couldn't even scream. Not yet. Her lungs locked in shock. The weight was on her now, pinning her. The smell of the tiger's breath hot and animal, tinged with raw meat from the morning's feed. Sicip's pupils were blown wide, his jaw lowering to deliver the second part of the attack. Teeth. His canines, each as long as a human finger, sought bone, not flesh. The first clamp was exploratory, a grip to hold her still, but the pressure was enough to drive pain like lightning through her entire frame. Rosa's hand shot out, not toward the tiger's face, but toward the concrete floor, searching for anything, any tool, any weapon. But the keeper's corridor was bare. There was nothing between her and him but the moment. This was no display of dominance, no warning bite. This was the unfiltered, ancient blueprint of a kill. The muscles in Sicip's forequarters bunched, preparing for the next devastating blow, and Rosa realized there would be no second chance to get up. In the half-second before he struck again, she made her only move. Turning her head, if only to spare her throat, it wouldn't be enough. The moment Sicip's jaws locked, the air changed. This wasn't the probing, testing bite of a predator gauging prey. It was commitment. His mouth closed over Rosa's upper torso with a force that could crush bone like driftwood. There was a muffled, sickening crack, ribs giving way under hundreds of pounds of pressure. The sound was almost drowned out by Rosa's strangled gasp. The tiger's breath filled her ears, each exhale a hot rush of carnivore musk. Her body jolted involuntarily as Sicip adjusted his hold, angling for deeper purchase. This was the moment every zookeeper trains to avoid. The one scenario the manuals warn you about, but never prepare you for. When the animal stops seeing you as a person and only sees you as meat. Sicip dragged her backward in a short, brutal motion, paws gripping like vices, claws punching through her uniform and into her skin. Rosa's heels scraped against the concrete, the sound sharp, desperate, like someone clawing for life with their whole body. She tried to brace against the pull, but there was no leverage. Every second the grip tightened, her breath grew shorter, her chest compressing under the relentless pressure. The tiger's eyes were locked, unblinking, fixed in a predator's trance. Her voice finally tore free, not a scream, but a single guttural cry that carried down the keeper corridor. No one could have mistaken it. It was the sound of someone realizing the fight was already lost. The moment Sicip clamped down harder, Rosa's body stopped being her own. She was no longer moving under her own strength. She was cargo, dragged across the concrete by a predator built for killing. His back legs bunched, muscles rippling under his orange and black coat. And then, one decisive pull. Rosa slid helplessly toward the enclosure's shadow, her hands clawing at the floor, fingers scraping raw against the rough surface. The sound was almost lost beneath the low, vibrating growl that poured from the tiger's throat, a sound so deep it rattled inside her chest. Her boots caught against the edge of a steel threshold. For a second she resisted, jerking back with all the strength left in her arms. But Sicip simply shifted his grip, dragging her with the brutal efficiency of an apex predator removing a kill from open ground. Each foot gained was another foot farther from safety. Behind her, the door to the keeper corridor shrank, so close moments ago, now slipping out of reach entirely. The fluorescent light from the service area gave way to the dim, earthy musk of the tiger's private space. And with every second, the realization solidified. No one could get to her now without crossing into his domain. That was exactly what Sicip wanted. The moment Rosa crossed that invisible boundary, she was in Sicip's world. The keeper's corridor, bright, clinical, safe, was gone. Now steel bars framed her view, but they weren't protection anymore. They were the walls of a cage, and she was on the wrong side. Sicip released his grip for just a heartbeat, circling her like a storm cloud. His tail lashed once, twice, a predator's metronome. Rosa tried to rise, but the floor was slick beneath her palms, damp with the musky scent of big cat territory. Her boots slipped, her knees buckled, and before she could find her footing, he struck again. The impact drove the air from her lungs. Her back hit the cold floor, the sound echoing in the confined space. Bars to her left, a concrete wall to her right. Nowhere to go. Sicip's face hovered inches from hers, breath hot and reeking of raw meat. His whiskers brushed her cheek as his pupils narrowed, focused entirely on her. Outside, voices shouted. Metal clanged. Someone was fumbling with keys, but the lock, the protocols, the sheer danger, everything slowed the rescue to a crawl. Inside, the tiger's world was closing in, and Rosa knew. Time was no longer on her side. Rosa's pulse thundered in her ears. Every second felt stretched, warped, as if the world was moving in slow motion. But the tiger wasn't. Sicip lunged again, his massive paw slamming down across her chest. The weight was crushing, a reminder of the hundreds of pounds of raw power holding her in place. Rosa's fingers clawed for something, anything to push against, to gain leverage. But the slick floor offered nothing. She felt the pull of his claws through her uniform, the heat of his body pressing down. Outside the enclosure, panicked voices barked orders. The metallic clatter of a gate being wrestled open filled the air, but it was still too far away. Someone yelled her name, sharp and urgent, but there was no way they could reach her without risking their own lives. Sicip's jaws hovered over her throat, lips peeling back to reveal curved teeth, ivory weapons built to crush. His muscles bunched. Rosa twisted at the last second, the bite catching her shoulder instead. But the pain was electric, white-hot, radiating through every nerve. Her vision blurred. The sounds around her dulled, muffled, as if the world were fading to the other side of a thick pane of glass. And somewhere, deep down, Rosa knew. This was her last fight. The shouting stopped, not because the danger had passed, because everyone outside knew they couldn't get to her in time. With a deafening slam, the outer gates were thrown shut. The locks engaged with a heavy metallic clank, sealing the enclosure from every side. It wasn't to protect Rosa anymore. It was to contain Sicip. The tiger stood over her motionless body, chest heaving, his golden eyes fixed on the world beyond the bars. His muzzle was stained dark. He paced once, twice, then stopped, ears swiveling toward the distant echo of footsteps. The air was thick, suffocating. Not even the birds dared to sing. The only sound was the low, rumbling growl of an apex predator defending what it believed was its kill. Staff stood frozen just beyond the safety line, their radios silent, their faces pale. No one dared move. Every second that passed felt like a knife edge pressed tighter to the collective throat of the zoo. Somewhere in that silence, the reality settled like a stone. Rosa was gone. And all that. The first sound to break the frozen air was the crunch of boots on gravel. Armed police moved in fast, rifles raised, eyes locked on the predator inside. Visitors, who only minutes earlier had been smiling at the entrance, were now being herded out by staff with trembling voices. Many didn't even know why. Others had caught fragments of shouted words, "Tiger, keep her down," and understood enough to be pale and silent. Inside the enclosure perimeter, the armed team fanned out, but there was no rush to storm in. Every second mattered, but so did every decision. A misstep here could endanger more lives. The zoo's most experienced handlers stood close by, radios crackling with clipped, tense orders. Sicip's pacing slowed. He stopped, ears twitching toward the movement outside. His tail lashed once, twice. He was agitated, but calm enough to be unpredictable. And there, beyond the bars, lay Rosa. Her body, so still against the enclosure floor, seemed almost unreal. The woman who had fed him, cleaned for him, cared for him, now lifeless at his feet. For all the noise of boots, radios, and low voices, there was a deeper silence. One that came with the weight of knowing this was irreversible. By midday, the zoo gates were locked, the pathways eerily empty. Where laughter and camera shutters had filled the air that morning, there was now only the sound of wind pushing through the hedgerows. Staff stood in small clusters, some staring at the ground, others hugging tightly. Every single one of them had worked alongside Rosa. Every single one knew. This wasn't just a colleague they had lost. This was family. The enclosure was cordoned off, Sicip now sedated and moved into isolation. He would not be destroyed, an agreement Rosa herself would have supported. But the decision did little to ease the raw grief pressing down on the zoo. News crews were already parked outside the gates. Headlines were being written, social media posts shared. But beyond the sensational coverage was the quieter truth. That Rosa's life had been defined not by the way she died, but by the way she lived. She had once said that caring for big cats wasn't a job. It was a privilege, and she had treated it that way, every single day. Rosa King's final shift ended in tragedy, but her devotion, her passion, and her courage will never be forgotten.